the 18th of October 2023. I'm Councillor Mpofu Coles, Chair of the Adult Social Care, Children Services and Education Committee. I would like to welcome you to tonight's meeting with councillors are required to attend in person. We will be using the equipment connecting the chamber into a Microsoft Teams meeting, and some of the officers involved this evening will be joining remotely via Teams. I need to inform everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and broadcast live on the internet through Teams, and a recording of the meeting will then be uploaded and available for repeat viewing on the councillor's website.
Chair, can I just raise a point about the seating arrangement? It's a little bit ridiculous to be sat and expected to turn around and watch a screen behind us in this arrangement. I know it's a fairly new adoption, and I'd just like to raise that point.
Okay. Thank you for raising that. I think it's a valid point, so we'll look into it next time because the screens are on behind you. Thank you. Thank you. So to continue, for information, I'd like to inform you of engagement work at the Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West, the BOB, the new BOB, Integrated Care Board, which is the ICB, to procure its non-emergent patient transport service, which is the NEPTS, because we deal with a lot of acronym you might see in the report contract. The ICB is currently undertaking a 6-week program of engagement, talking to current service users and their families, carers, to learn more about how to improve their experiences with transport service in BOB. This was launched in September and we close Friday, 27 October. Further information can be found on the BOB ICB online engagement website, details of which will be published with the minutes of this meeting. So we wanted to give you this information. I would like to welcome everybody who just joined online also. I also wanted to say this month is Black History Month. And wanted to recognize and celebrate contribution of Black people to the British history. However, the achievements of Black women has often been forgotten. And this year we are celebrating, we salute our Black sisters in the whole town of Reading, and in the council we have a diverse staff for their contribution and hard work. So we like to take I would like to take this opportunity to celebrate all those sisters who work hard every day in our council and all the other communities of Reading, the Black sisters, we are in it. Thank you very much. So we start our agenda mainly to look at any apologies that I've got. I've got only Councillor Robinson apology and Councillor Bowsington online. Is that right? Yeah, she's online. So those ones. And I have Councillor Hoskin is running late and will be joining us because of other issues that have come up urgently. There's no other apology. Thank you. We move first to our agenda. So we'll start firstly because of the young people who have had a long day from school and need to go home early. So we'll ask the Reading Youth Council young people to come and talk about their constitution. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm Fiona Hostler. I'm the Head of Education Access and Support at Brighter Futures for Children. And I just wanted to introduce members of our Youth Council. We've got James, Amani and Maximilian that's going to talk to you this evening. And they've prepared lots of wise words for you. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the committee. It is such a pleasure to come again to this council's meeting. I am Maximilian Kaluzhnov and I am the chair of the Reading Youth Council. Here today, we have also Amani, who is the Deputy Chair of the Reading Youth Council, and James, who is the Deputy Member of the Youth Parliament for Reading. We are delighted to present a summary of the most significant achievements of the past year and what we are looking forward to doing for this year. So, over the past year, we proudly showcased Reading's youth voice at the British Youth Council's annual meeting. At the House of Commons, we deliberated on the vital connection between the environment and our health. Linking onto the topic of the environment, we looked at our commitment to the planet through the Youth Climate Festival, and this demonstrated our dedication to pressing global environmental concerns. We also collaborated a lot with the Reading Borough Council, and our impact was vital in areas like apprenticeships, work experience, and mentoring programs. Additionally, our voice played a massive role in the selection of the Chief Executive Director. In terms of more local things, we looked at our outreach to schools, and this culminated in our grand 2023 annual Reading Youth Council conference. And I can tell you it was a great success. And then we also looked at the Reading Young People's Hub, where it is a youth-driven initiative to try and build a centre where young people can come together in Reading and study, relax, and do whatever. In terms of international collaboration, we deepened our ties with the Reading Düsseldorf Association, focusing on innovative strategies to bolster youth interaction between the cities. And finally, for our members, we hosted self-defense classes, which enhanced our growth. So I believe that this year has been a great testament to our collective passion, determination, and our collaboration. The impact we've made locally, internationally, and nationally is a testament to our commitment to the youth of Reading. As we look back, we are filled with pride, and as we look forward, we are filled with anticipation for even greater accomplishments this year. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Maximilian. As previously mentioned, I'm James. I'm the Deputy Member for Youth Parliament for Reading. And following on from what Maximilian said, I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about what's going on in the Reading Youth Council at the moment. So it's fantastic to hear about our past successes, such as our really well attended conference that happened the previous year. But I wasn't here for that. I'm a relatively newish member of the Reading Youth Council, and I've been around for a few months now. And so I think it's important that I talk about my first impressions of the council and how we've gelled and worked hard together over the past few months that I've been here. I was really quite surprised in the first few sessions I participated in all honesty. Without coming across too cynically, it was amazing to me to see a group of young people working so cohesively as a team, having mature debates and discussions about real issues affecting the youth of Reading, and taking proactive steps to actually act on the points discussed in our meetings. I feel so incredibly proud to be part of such a hands-on and forward-thinking group of people, acting on behalf of the young people of Reading, all with the simple aim of making the lives of the youth in Reading better. We're doing this in two main ways through our two campaigns this year. Our environment campaign is going really well with our Garden Friends programme, and members are in the process of organising meetings with local scout groups to educate the cubs and beavers about the environment. However, by allowing them to create fun, colourful designs on plant pots and then planting their own seeds, we hope that it will be an engaging and fun experience, whilst also having educational value, so our youth can grow up educated and ready to tackle the climate challenge in the future. We also got collaborations coming with the Risk Global Cafe, Zero Waste Shop, and are exploring the opportunity to hold an environment debate in a model UN style scenario to spread awareness through education for as many young people in Reading who would like to attend. In our Jobs, Money, Home and Opportunities campaign, our second campaign, we're going through the stages of planning a careers fair for the young people of Reading, getting in contact with companies from local to global, as well as universities and apprenticeship providers, all with the aim of exposing our youth to as many potential jobs and educational experiences as possible, which we think is really important to prepare them for the future. On top of this, we're about to run social media campaigns on sites like Instagram, raising the profile of our youth council and making us as visible as possible. At the same time, our social media officer is creating accessible infographics to share via these channels with basic information about finances and how to use money wisely, with the hope that this will influence our youth for the better. Food drives are also on the upcoming agenda, and we're hoping to collaborate with local food banks like Ready Food. Another reason why we're proud of our youth council is for its ever-increasing diversity of members. We have ages from all across the targeted range, with 12-year-old Sinan's contributions being as valuable as our sixth formers. And that's really special environment to be in, as it's truly reflective of the Reading, the population of the youth in Reading. We're not all just 15 to 17-year-olds, so it's fantastic to see such a broad spectrum of ages. Looking to the future, as part of the Membership and School Outreach Committee, Maximilian Amani and I have our sights set on increasing the wealth of different views of our youth council even more, encouraging new members from different schools to become youth council ambassadors in their own schools, to spread the good work of our youth council to as many young people as possible. And I know Amani is going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. So many thanks for your time. It's been a real honour to speak here today, and I'm going to pass on to Amani now. Thank you.
So hello everyone, my name is Amani, as you may know already. I am the Deputy Chair of the Reading Youth Council. So following on from what both of my peers have said, I'm going to talk about our new outreach programme and the constitution that we have set out for the prospective year. So for our new outreach programme, we have presented our members with 10 different roles in order to increase our outreach as much as possible. One example of this is our school ambassador programme, which entails 1 or 2 selected students from schools, not youth councillors, where we have schools where we have no members and liaising between the school community and the youth council. These ambassadors would help to promote youth council initiatives in their schools. Another role, in which I'm currently leading, is regular outreach events. This would involve workshops in schools as well as the wider community, where the youth council has currently little or no presence. This sector of the initiative ties closely with our 2 campaigns, which should be setting off very soon. We also have gap analysis, identifying which schools the Youth Council currently needs to increase their presence in. By promoting this whole outreach idea, we are attempting to be a more influential group in Reading and be able to help young people in more ways than we already are. Now I would like to move on and shift our focus onto the Reading Youth Council constitution. Every one of our current 23 members have been elected into their position. I have been a member for about 1.5 years now. Our main role and motto of our youth council is to take part in planning and delivering services to young people, as stated in the 3rd page of our constitution. Some aspects which we have kept the same is our fortnightly meetings here in the Civic Centre, but when we come close to a major event, such as the annual conference, we meet more frequently, usually on a weekly basis. In late July 2023, we altered the structure of our youth council by shifting some aspects of our constitution. We added in the role of a conflict mediator, and we removed the outreach officer and replaced this role with social media and publicity officer. And as a council, we have noticed that the importance and following impact of this manoeuvre. Furthermore, as part of our outreach and connecting with more young people, we have increased our use of Instagram and the Reading Youth Council website, which is done by Bright Future for Children, and we're hoping to run adverts on these platforms soon. So I'd like to thank you all so much for listening, and we hope that as members of Reading Youth Council, we have informed you all on what we do and what we plan to do in the future. And we are open to any questions if that's allowed.
Oh, you'd like to take some questions or comments, yeah? Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome and thank you for coming and speaking to us this evening. I've met some of you before. I've met Maximilian and also his parents. I note that. So thank you for your presentation as well. I note that we are asked this evening, recommendation 3 is that we actually agree the constitution, so it's up to us to agree, and I have no qualms in doing that. I think it's a very impressive piece of work. I think we can learn a lot. Actually, things like the conflict conflict resolution person, did you say? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah,
I think
conflict mediator.
conflict mediator, right? That's a great idea. And it's really inspiring to see young people getting involved wholeheartedly and giving up so much of your time for this. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to ask if you'd expand on something. We're all politicians here, so we've probably got some interest in elections. And I was reading about the external elections in section 8.2. I actually have my son is actually year 9 kid as well, so I'd like to sort of advocate for this to him and see if he wants to be interested and involved. But 8.2.4, you discuss how it makes a point about elections. I think that's the only bit that tells me how elections are run, but I just wondered if you can expand a bit on how are people like elected? Do you work with the schools? Are the schools, is the onus on schools to run the elections, or yeah, how do people join in and get involved in it basically?
So since COVID, we've changed to an application system, but we are planning probably for next year to possibly return to this election system. But what it has currently been is that it is a Google form, and we would put it on our social media channels. We would also send it to schools or promote it in our schools, and also in our conference when it comes to it. And then people can fill it in, and as we've done so far is we've then looked at the applications and given feedback as to how the people can improve their applications, or if the application we have deemed is good, we can get them into a council. But from next year, what we're going to probably do is to actually return to pre-COVID terms with having ballots. So it would be, you would have your name on it, and you would have, I think it's a 500-word manifesto. Then it would be distributed around schools. We haven't thought exactly whether to keep it digital or also have paper ballots, but then people could choose a candidate that they think would fit as a member, and then we would tally up the results and announce it. I hope that covers your question.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Millie.
Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to start off by saying a huge thank you to the three of you for coming along this evening. It's really genuinely been so interesting. I've really enjoyed reading the Constitution, and just hearing about, obviously, so much of the work that you're doing is really fascinating. I find it all really interesting. I really like the stuff you're doing around the environmental work that you're doing, which I think is incredibly important. I'm really interested to know a little bit. I mean, there was actually so much we could talk about, the democratic voting stuff, the climate action, the work you're doing around mental health. I could go on, but there's so much positive work, which is really interesting. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the mentoring that you're doing within schools, and you mentioned the Scouts as well. So, you know, I think colleagues would be really interested to know more about that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So with the Scouts, it's an upcoming thing in our environment campaign where hopefully we've got in touch with local Scout groups, and we will be going out on the days that they've got meetings and delivering these sessions. So there may be a small presentation on you know, simplified, what challenges are our planet facing, how can we help you know, in our own capacity to sort of go some way to solving these, and hopefully do that in a fun way as well. I've been a Scout for 10 years. They're a super receptive bunch of young people, and we think that they'd be a really great place to start with this, and then hopefully, if that goes well, we can expand it into schools potentially, or other groups of young people.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. I'm particularly interested in what you're talking about with the careers fair, because with the costs of university sort of going up, I'm not sure that people understand the other routes that they can take well enough. We've spent so long promoting university as being sort of like what you do post 18. So I love the idea of promoting apprenticeships. And so my question was, are you thinking about running that during school time, or are you thinking of running it outside of school time? And my reason for asking that is I'm actually a teacher, but my school is just over the border into West Berks. So we have at least a third of our pupils who are Reading kids, but obviously they're not in a Reading school. So I was just kind of wondering whether you've given any thought, and I know it's a big ask, to sort of how you reach out to those cross-border kids who are still Reading students, which was why I was thinking, you know, sort of if you ran it at the weekend or during school holidays, perhaps they could still attend it if their schools knew about it and were able to publicise it. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'll answer that. So I go to Little Heath School. So I go to school in West Berkshire, and I'm also part of the Reading Council because I live here. So I live in the RG1 area. I would say our careers fair would be open for anyone. We wouldn't want to minimise it just for schools in the Reading Borough, because it would be people still live in Reading, and we want to get as much outreach as possible. So we definitely wouldn't say to certain schools that you cannot come. And I think we were thinking of doing it during school time as well, because then we would be able to have schools come together as a group, and that would ultimately increase the amount of people coming. And we were hoping to do it here. We don't know. That's something we are pledging. Yeah, that is something we are pledging. So I thought I would mention that. But yeah, we wouldn't just say to West Berkshire kids that they can't come here. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Councillor Gittings.
Mine's sort of more of a comment rather than a question. I'm about to say I obviously completely applaud the work of the Youth Council, I think, over many years, because my ward colleague in Coley, Councillor Ellie Emberson, was previously a member of the Youth Council and the Youth Parliament. And I know you're not supposed to be political, but obviously she did join us in the Labour Party and makes a fantastic contribution across the town with her efforts, and particularly in my ward. She's a really hard-working councillor. So it does show the efficacy of this process, and also particularly applaud your call for voting at 16, because I think that's really important to get young people engaged in the democratic process, which clearly you are. I just wanted to make a sort of comment around in 4.32, your social media. We had a look in our little meeting beforehand. We were saying that actually some organisations could actually learn from your social networking policies, particularly about the accounts being held by responsible people and things like that. But particularly in this time where we've got heightened tension and sometimes that online can be rather toxic, members are expected to be tolerant and respectful while online, and I think that's really, really important, because we live in a social media age, and this isn't going to go away, is it? More and more people get engaged, but often the debates on there aren't respectful and tolerant. So particularly applaud you for that stance, and if only everybody was that way, the world would be a slightly better place, I think.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, and you know, we completely agree with that, and that's not just for the members who hold these sort of official social media accounts. Obviously, that's for all of our members, because you know, we're expected to responsibly represent the young people in Reading, and we hope that we can do that fairly and politely online.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. On the social media point, I've been asked by the Youth Council whether you would mind consenting to me taking a photo of them before they leave in their pride position, so that they can showcase their achievement this evening. Councillor.
Of course, they can go ahead. Before you do the photos, we need to look at the report and make recommendations. The recommendations are that the committee note the work of the Reading Youth Council in 22-23. The committee endorses the Reading Youth Council priorities for 2023 to 2024, that the revised constitution of of the council is agreed by the committee. Do we agree? Great. So that's unanimous, all of us. Thank you. So you can have your social media photo at the moment.
Chair, I think this is also recorded, isn't it? So the young people can go home and watch themselves back on the recording.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
I don't recommend it, actually.
Madam Chair, could I possibly speak, please?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Two things. One, I congratulate the three members of the Youth Council for their very, very articulate, well-informed presentation. Secondly, I'm afraid that the recording, they're off camera. As you yourself, Madam Chair, you're partially on camera. It would be great if the council improved the video coverage because it is very, very limited, sadly. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. All right, thank you so much for coming. I know you have had a long day and we really appreciate you coming this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so we are moving to item 2, which is the declaration of interest. Any declaration of interest?
Yes, Chair. I work in alternative provision education, which will affect discussions perhaps. Okay. And also I've spent more than I would have liked to on dentist fees this year, which may also affect discussions.
Okay, noted. Thank you. Any other declaration of interest? No, thank you. We then move to minutes of adult social care, children and education committee, which were done on the 12th of July 23. Any matters rising on those minutes? No? Okay. And we then move to item 4, which is the minutes of other bodies again for health and well-being, which were done on the 14th of July 2023. Is that right? Yeah. Any matters arising? No matters arising. Thank you. Item 5, which is petitions. I don't have any. I don't know if there's anybody who has any, but I don't have any that have come. Thank you. Okay, we go to item 6, which is questions of members of the public and councillors. So on this, I would like to ask Councillor Cresswell to first ask a question on transport as the chair, if you don't mind. On transport, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Brighter Futures for Children educational transport policy for over 16s states that transport will only be provided to settings that are attended for more than 500 hours per year. A subset of the SEND pupil population are recommended to attend educational settings for less than 500 hours per year and cannot access public transport. For these children, their places are funded, but their transport is not, which seems inconsistent and puts at risk their only contact with the world outside their home. What is the review process for the transport policy, and can the rationale behind the 500-hour limit be explained so that alternatives may be suggested that keep the original purpose while accommodating a broader range of need?
Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Chair. I thank Councillor Cresswell for the question. The Brighter Futures for Children Educational Transport Policy is informed by statutory guidance and places an emphasis on developing independence for learners over 16 in preparation for adulthood. Maximising the opportunities for young people to learn to travel independently using public transport is an important priority. Less than 500 hours per year education equates to less than 2.9 hours education per day, and there are very few pupils where less than 2 hours of education per day could be deemed to be the best offer. Statutory guidance is clear that we should maximise the access to pupils to education to enable them wherever possible to access their statutory entitlement to education, employment and training. We aim to achieve this by creatively considering education and training options to accommodate the broadest range of needs, as well as maximising the benefits of, for example, learning where this is suitable for children. E-learning where this is suitable for pupils. Funding from HM Government for post-16 transport assistance provision was withdrawn from local authorities and given to the individual schools and colleges, and parents can apply to these for bursary funding. The transport team will provide advice and guidance in this regard. A particular area of focus previously reported to ACE Committee is tackling the underlying issues children are facing with increased anxiety following the pandemic period, with the high prevalence of children experiencing emotionally based school avoidance. The solution for these children is not to accept a limited number of hours to access to education, but to continue the work being led by our emotionally based school avoidance service to integrate children back into education. We will be bringing forward to the next ACE Committee proposals to consult on the school travel policy, but nationally there are significant challenges in funding the growing demand for transport assistance. The emphasis will therefore continue to be on maximising school access to education and maximising the benefits of independent travel for Reading young people.
Thank you, Councillor McQueen. Councillor Criswell, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, Chair. Thanks for your reply. It's welcomed and shed some light on the issue. My follow-up will be, in this review, how do you think we can keep those very great aims of independence while also catering to the needs of a very diverse population, and some people are right on the edges of this population also need to be catered for, and we can't let people fall through the gaps.
No, and I thank you for that follow-up question. I think it's an important point. I think what I would suggest is that we work with the transport strategy that's going to be coming back to ACE, and then we can assess that as it comes through and debate it as and when. But if there's any further questions, I can get back to you by email.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Criswell, you're going to the second question. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Dentists across the town are stopping providing NHS dental care. For example, Castle Hill Dental will not offer any, or now do not offer any NHS treatment. The nearest available dentist taking on NHS patients at the time of writing of this question was in Thatcham. I haven't checked this month. What can the council do to support the provision of NHS dental care in Reading?
Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Chair, and again I thank Councillor Cresswell for the question. The subject of dentistry is of real concern to councillors and officers. The available data shows that there is indeed a clear need for the prevention of poor oral health and improved access to dental care in Reading. We all understand the importance of easy access to treatment when we need it, especially if we're in pain. We also recognise there are many people in Reading who have trouble in gaining access to a dentist. It is important to recognise the role of the Council and our relation to the commissioning of dental care services. As part of the integrated care system, the Council has a prevention role in the promotion of good oral health, which prevents the need for emergency dental care. We do this through our public health offer to the system, which ensures that commissioning of dental services is informed by oral health needs assessments and meets the needs of local people. Production of a refreshed oral health strategy commenced in 2019, and this work will be resumed as the local public health system is restructured. Meanwhile, we continue to collaborate with our NHS commissioning partners and to carry out our preventative work by using the ring-fence public health grant mandate services to promote good oral health through the health visitors and school nursing contract and through toothbrushing packs for children's centres and nurseries. We've recently received a report from the Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West Integrated Care Board Commissioners that sets out the current challenges facing the commissioners of dental care and dental practitioners as they manage the recovery from the pandemic. The surging demand for their services and a complex payment system, which is discouraging to those considering entering a dentist into the National Health Service. Much of this is beyond the powers of the Council to affect directly. The Council will continue to work with the Integrated Care Board to ensure dentistry provision is targeted based on the needs of our residents within the remit of our role.
Thank you, Councillor McQueen. Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Cresswell?
Yes, I do, Chair. Thank you. Thanks for your full and informative answer. Prevention is good, but as we were all experiencing, I think that there effectively is no NHS dentistry available to many of my to residents. And so my question is, I see the role and of the council in strategic way, but can we not also represent our residents by jumping up and down and shouting about this issue to those who have power over the situation?
Councillor McQueen.
Sorry, my mic wasn't on there. Thank you for your supplementary question. I feel as though that because the next item on the agenda will cover this, I think I'll refrain from answering until we've heard this report, and then we can all have a debate because it's a very serious subject. So thank you.
Councillor Gitting, did you want to respond to his question, or you wanted to make a comment?
If I may.
Okay, all right.
I know it's to do with the next debate, but I just wanted to raise the issue. Would the League Council agree with me that Labour's published plans to recruit more dentists, a lot more dentists, to help fill the gaps, particularly in areas where there isn't NHS provision, and to free up an extra 700,000 appointments per year, would help alleviate the situation which has been brought about, quite frankly, by the Tory government being asleep at the wheel on this for a number of years, and particularly post-Brexit, actually, which I know has caused some recruitment problems.
Thank you, Councillor Gittings. Yeah, very valid point. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to a very topical issue as we're talking about dentistry. We have our colleagues from the NHS. We have two parts from NHS today, two topical issues. One is dentistry, which is our 7th item, and the next will be AIDS. So on the sexual health one, on the 7 dentistry update, we have you, Okifi, with the senior program manager. I think with a colleague of his, Martin White, as Sarah Webster, executive director, couldn't attend. Is you online? Yes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Right, thank
you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, well, I think you've started the discussion really in terms of the issues around the recovery from the pandemic and what's been happening with access to NHS dentistry. I think it is probably worth reporting that in Reading, relatively the situation is recovering far better than other parts of the southeast. If we look at Oxfordshire, we've lost a lot more practices and a lot more NHS capacity, and as the speaker was saying earlier, we have lost one in Reading in terms of Castle Hill handing its contract back. I think a key issue actually is in terms of understanding almost why NHS dentistry is sort of recovering from the pandemic. It's up, the numbers attending, and it's a count of patients who attend over a sort of 2-year period is how you count it. And that is up. It's up about 20% in the last 18 months. So it's a sort of positive story in that respect. But there was a significant loss of NHS capacity for a period of 2 years, essentially, where the practices either were shut or operated below their full capacity. So the result was that we did see big backlogs in terms of patients then trying to get into the NHS system. And because they'd had gaps in their treatment, when they got in to see the dentist, their treatment plans were taking longer to complete, which was then making it more difficult for new people to get in. And I don't know if people understand, but people are not registered with dental practices. So you go to a dental practice and they're responsible for your care while you're in a course of treatment. So it's not like we've been in with a doctor, but the way it tends to work is dentists have regular attenders and they recall those patients to come back in at clinically necessary intervals. And what we saw with the pandemic was big gaps then in terms of patient attendance, and then when they came back in, much more need. And as was discussed, some of this is now being compounded by practices choosing to leave the NHS or reduce their NHS commitment. Part of that is related to workforce. It is people then opting, preferring, if you like, not to work within the confines of the NHS contract. There are sort of frustrations out there. The current contract has been in place since 2005, and there were some sort of changes made to it nationally last year, which are designed to address some of those concerns, but they remain, and there are sort of ongoing national discussions about what's going to happen with a contract, which essentially sets the dentists within a cash limited allocation. It sets them an activity target they've got to hit each year to make sure they retain that level of funding. And part of the problems that dentists have had is as the patients have come back into the system, their treatment needs have been more complex. More time in the chair presents actually risks to the dentist in terms of whether they can deliver their contracts. So that has had an impact on them. Again, in terms of that contract delivery, things are significantly improved. So about 30% was the level that the contract delivery dropped to at the peak of the pandemic. Normally around 95% of contracted activity is delivered each year. That recovered to about 66% in 21-22. Last year was about, in Bob was about 80%, and in Reading about 88%. So again, relatively Reading was doing well in terms of contract delivery. So things are recovering in terms of access and contract delivery, but it is difficult for those patients who've have not been able to get into the system and not seen the dentist over the last couple of years. So as I said, there's national actions going on trying to support that, and then locally there's a thing called additional access sessions where practices can deliver more activity and then try to see patients urgently who've not seen a dentist regularly. That's had relatively low take up because we're sort of asking the dentist to do more work when we know there's more sessions, when we know there's a workforce issue. So in June this year, we've introduced a flexible commissioning scheme within the ICB. And what that's doing is that allows the dentist to convert a proportion of their contract from activity to access. So it's designed to specifically to support patients who've been struggling to get into the system. And so it's for identified for patients who've not attended for 2 years, or have moved to the area or relocate frequently. And so they can set more time aside for the patients who are likely to have additional treatment needs. So what we're doing is trying to open up the system for the patients who've been struggling to get in, and then also try and reduce the pressure that the dentists have got in terms of delivering their contracted levels of activity. So the take up for that in Bob has been quite good. We've got 30 practices involved. And I think after about 4 months, they've done about 900 sessions, seen about 3,500 patients. So it's been quite a good take up. Most of that has been patients who've not been able to get in for a couple of years. The take up of that scheme is much lower in sort of the Berkshire West area than other parts of Bob, and part of that is linked to the practices feeling they've got the capacity within their contract to deliver the service, so they're not feeling the need so much to convert the activity in the same way. So there's just one practice involved in the Reading area. And the other thing, just in the paper, the other backlog that we've experienced is waiting times following referral into specialist services. So again, investment's gone into that, particularly into community dental services and to a thing called Tier 2 oral surgery, which is a sort of community-based specialism rather than patients going to hospital. That's been quite successful in terms of bringing down the number of long waiters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugh. I think Martin wants to come in on this, or do you want to wait until the question?
I didn't know I was involved in this, Chair, but I'm happy to be here and support Hugh. I'm here to talk about the sexual health paper, which is coming up next.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. Yes. Now to the councillors. Any questions? Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I was going to ask about what's sort of strikingly obvious about this report and the graphs on page 39 related to the percentage of population accessing dental service, NHS dental services, and the number of adults and children. And, you know, actually, I think that Mr. O'Keefe has actually given us a pretty comprehensive explanation. But intuitively, when first looking at this, I thought, well, after the pandemic, you'd expect obviously a drop off during the pandemic. After the pandemic, there would be this pent up demand, and intuitively, you'd expect that levels to exceed or recover fully. But it has been explained that actually, this pent up demand is actually now a more complex need because people have gone for a period without having dental treatment, and their needs are more complex and more difficult to meet. However, still, it's worth asking the question, I guess. You know, it seems that in the graph at the top of page 39, the percentage of population accessing dental services sort of flattened off. There was some recovery up till July 23, but it does. Are we possibly sort of arriving at a steady state that is, you know, several points down from the pre-pandemic levels? Is that a danger? A similar story on the graph at the bottom of the page, particularly on the line that's higher up in black and white. It's difficult to see whether it's adults or children. Presumably it's adults. Yeah, so you have talked about how your plans to try and get that to recover, but is there a danger we're sort of settling on some sort of lower proportion of the population who are now taking care of their teeth, and is that going to cause us, you know, problems in the future, basically?
Thank you, Councillor Davis. You?
Yes, I think that is a risk. I think, yeah, what you are seeing, I think, is the impact there of the surge of the people who previously attended coming back into the system. And often those are the people who've been regular attenders and may overall have better oral health. So, and it's also a factor of this lost capacity. So In the Bob area, we've lost 93,000 units of dental activity. That's about 14 dental chairs worth, just to give you an idea of what that volume is. So the flexible commissioning scheme that we brought in, and this is something that we're looking at potentially in the longer term as well. So it's a sort of local response in terms of the Bob is the one area in the southeast that's doing this at the moment. It is really trying to look at how we can use the contract differently to try and help people get into the service. And also there's this health inequality issue we've got. So what we are trying to do through this is trying to support those who've had, real problems in the past. So one of the issues is asylum seekers are part of this scheme. We're trying to support them get in. Just in sort of broad context in terms of numbers who tend to go to NHS dentists and who goes elsewhere, very roughly, in this sort of area, about 50% of the population would normally go to an NHS dentist. About 30% would normally go privately, and about 20% don't go at all. And they'll only go if they've got a problem. So that's pain, swelling or bleeding is when they'll get into the system. Often they are in the more deprived groups, and they are the people who've been struggling to get in. So we're trying to sort of design something in terms of this flexible commissioning approach that initially we want to help with the access through this. So we're happy we've got across Bob at least quite a good number of practices involved. There's 203 dental practices altogether, so it's 15%, something like that involved. But it's also whether this model we can use in the future for other things that might just design the dental contract slightly differently.
Yeah, thank you for that answer, Mr. O'Keefe. That's great.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this report. It's it's obviously very interesting reading, and we're all, as councillors, we are all really concerned about this. So obviously the question that was the response, I think, gave a clear indication about the role of the council. But as councillors, we're all really concerned. We have residents that are contacting us and really concerned. You hear horror stories about people taking the teeth out with pliers. It's just dreadful, and people are sort of at breaking point really, and they're desperate measures and desperate to see a dentist. So even though I really do value this report and the collaborative work of working local authority in the Bob, I think it'd be really useful for because I'm lead councillor for health and education. This is raised at my lead member briefings. It's raised at Health and Wellbeing Board. There's a fantastic report from Health Watch at the moment talking about dentistry. The fact that I read that 40,000 young children went to hospital in 2021 and 2022 with tooth decay. Tooth decay is one of the most common reasons for young children between 6 and 10 to be admitted, and it's it's just really frightening statistics. Obviously, we all hope on this side we're going to have a Labour government, and we're talking about 700,000 appointments. But we need, I think our residents are suffering now. It's kind of desperate. So I think what I'd like to say is what I'd suggest through the chair is if maybe this, if we can come back, this is such an important area that we all need to, we're dealing with our casework and our residents and supporting them. And I think this is such an important issue. I'd like it to come back to us, obviously for the chair to just work on timings and to come back and this is, address this issue and keep it at the forefront really for us all to be talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very. I think that's a good idea also to look at this, if you don't mind, also Martin and and you to come back maybe after 6 months to keep the conversation talking, because the public are worried and they want to know how much we are inputting in this, and an update after 6 months or so will be quite helpful if you agrees and coordinates with Martin and us. Yeah.
Yes, we'll do.
Yeah. There is also another question from, Councillor Cresswell, and then I'll go to Councillor McGoldrick. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the report. I think a useful addition to the time series on page 39 would be some kind of shading to indicate the availability of NHS appointments to people who aren't registered on the lists of practices. So, for instance, we don't know whether the 43% is representative of people who were trying to access NHS services, or it may well be that 65% of people were trying to get an appointment and only 43% succeeded. I think it would be useful to track and monitor the availability of NHS appointments, which is broadly non-existent, I would say, and also, if we could, you mentioned the waiting times for emergency appointments. If we could, if there's a way of summarising that in a similar kind of time series, that would be good to see.
Thank you. Did you want to make a comment about that, Hugh?
I think it's difficult for us to capture information about failed appointments. We have had some work that was being done by the NHS Contact Centre during the pandemic. They sort of finished doing that in June, which did provide really useful information about the numbers of people contacting them in terms of the challenges they were having around access. And there was national data on that. There were certainly certain parts of the country with, very significant numbers. Some of those in the southeast, the ones that did feature highest in our patch were Reading and Slough. Reading and Oxford. We have got that. So we do know that's been a particular challenge in the area, and and we're conscious as well that that some of this recovery, which in Reading is looking quite good, might be masking the fact that there are still real challenges for people in terms of getting into the system. So I think we can be doing more work with the practices to understand what's happening with them. We know that some of the practices in the town, because we've got one or two really, I think one of the practices in Reading is the biggest NHS practice in the Bob area. It's 60,000 units of dental activity. It's a very large practice. It's on the Oxford Road. It's serving one of the more deprived parts of the area. So we kind of know they design their access arrangements in the knowledge that they're going to get quite high numbers of patients phone on the day with problems. So there are those local responses being produced, but as I say, I think this access issue is going to be with us for a little while yet, and we think things like flexing the contract is something we've got to keep working on and seeing if we can either get others involved or find ways with them, with those practices who maybe don't want to do the flexible. Is another way we can look at them sort of supporting access, being conscious all the time of the workforce issues that we're hearing about as well.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor McGoldrick.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. O'Keefe, for a very thorough report and for answering all our questions so comprehensively. I won't repeat what others have said. Obviously, we are all seeing this in our casework, and our residents are really feeling the pain after over a decade of failure from the Conservatives on this. But what I will say, what I wanted to ask was in relation to access challenges. Your report addresses the fact that people handing back NHS contracts because it's sort of unviable from a business model for the various reasons that you laid out. I wanted just to get your assessment on two things. One, do you think we've reached the peak of that handing back of NHS contracts? Is this the beginning of a trend that's going to get worse, or is this where broadly, in your opinion, are we in terms of how more how much more loss we're going to get of NHS access in the borough? And the other thing I wanted to ask, you very ably laid out the importance of flexible commissioning in addressing some of these issues, and the fact that Reading is doing so well comparatively in terms of how we're coping with it. But you talked about it being a pilot practice, and I just wondered sort of what what the scope is for that, broadening that pilot out, what sort of KPIs you'll be looking at in terms of whether you expand that pilot. And yeah, so slightly connected to my first one, are we getting towards the end of this crisis, or is this the beginning of it?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I think the answer is we don't know. Actually, in terms of the handback situation in this patch, most of ours have been handed back in the last year or so, and the handbacks mainly have tended to be in more rural areas, where I think it has proved more difficult to attract workforce, and also I know about other parts of the south east in terms of those coastal areas. So it looks as though as you come a bit further out of London, it seems to be more problematic in terms of keeping the NHS contracts going. So West Oxfordshire, that area, has really had significant loss of NHS capacity. And broadly, we're hearing this has been an issue in the NHS for a while in terms of NHS provision in more geographically isolated areas and attracting dentists to those areas. So we're hopeful that things are leveling out in that respect. We are doing a lot of work with the profession now in terms of what we might do about this. We're investing quite a bit of money into particularly the secondary care recovery, and I think part of the issue is the answer in primary care probably isn't necessarily more money. It's to do with trying to make sure we utilise all we've got through people being able to fully deliver their contracts with the workforce that they need. In terms of the metrics around the flexible commission, we are starting to look at that a bit more closely now. So there's issues about whether practices are delivering their sessions. Some of them are having workforce problems in terms of doing that. Some of them are doing really well. They're delivering fully and seeing good numbers of patients. Are they getting a good number of patients through those sessions? Are they bringing them into continuing care? What's the satisfaction rate like with those sorts of things? So, we do have to look at whether we're getting return on the investment that's going in, because it's still, it's an offsetting arrangement in terms of what we're doing. So there is still resource going into that. So yeah, we're just moving into that phase of looking at these schemes more closely now in terms of how they've done 4 months in, to come to a view about how we take it forward. I suspect in terms of the flexible commissioning, the focus is going to be on access for a little while, but if we can stabilise that, we're also doing this recommissioning of all the activity we've lost. If we can get the situation more stable in that respect, I think that will help. And we kind of know that if we go out to some practices through this recommissioning process, there's a good chance quite a few of those are going to take that on. They will do more NHS work. We think there's a good chance of that in Reading, actually, in terms of the history of sort of delivery in the area. So I think that's an area where we can feel a bit more optimistic about that. But the challenges in the rural areas, I think, are more substantial.
Thank you. I've got a last question from Councillor Gavin.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask you, you gave some figures about usage or the sort of where people come from using dentistry services, and I can't remember which way round you said it, whether you said it was 50% private and 30% NHS or the other way round. It doesn't, that isn't really my question. My question is that are you using that as a working assumption in terms of provision? Because I think that there'll be many people in this room who will have in the past had NHS dentists for many years, but have been forced into private dental care because there has been no other option. And we're in the fortunate position of being able to afford to do that. Many of our residents can't afford to do that. I wouldn't choose to be a private patient if I had the choice. If I had the choice, I'd be an NHS patient. But I don't currently have the choice at my dental practice, which I've been at for 40 years. I don't have that choice, and therefore I have to be a private patient. So I'm concerned that we're using this percentage division in to model what we think the capacity should be for NHS access. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes.
Councillor.
So yes, just an answer to that. So it is 50% is NHS. And in terms of what we're doing around recovery, we're not looking at it as a ceiling. So, you know, if the need is out there, we would look to go higher than that. I think this sort of, you know, early 50% or whatever that attend is quite historic, actually. It's just kind of always been the way in the NHS. So there was a big collapse in NHS access in the 1990s when the 1992 contract came in, where many dentists left the NHS. And at that point, the access was around 55% nationally. So there does seem to be some sort of almost like law applies about how many people will go on the NHS and how many will opt to go private for whatever reason. That seems to be something that happens over time. It does fluctuate a little bit around the country. Certain areas are higher than others in terms of what happens, but we're not seeing that as a ceiling. What we're looking to do is just achieve ongoing improvements. And I think we've had discussions to say, well, you know, we talk about trying to get back to pre-pandemic levels, but if it's possible, why not go further? So, you know, we're just looking to support the access people need. There is ultimately there will be a funding constraint in terms of trying to get there. We've got cash limited budgets to do that, but you know, we're sort of you know, we are working to at the very least get back to where we were.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hugh, for the report and analyzing this for us so that we understand it better. And I think it's much appreciated. And I think as lead Councillor McQueen said that we need to come back after 6 months to keep on talking about this, and Martin White, the work towards that and see how we go. We really appreciate your update. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, we go to item number 8, also a topical issue. This one, we had thought that Melissa was the one who was going to just bring an update, but I understand that the Sexual Health Service update is Dr. Alan Tang, consultant in sexual health and HIV, and Rachel Smart, lead nurse at the Flory Clinic, and Martin, also internal Martin White, supporting this. They are online. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you. I'm going to just start sharing my screen. We're going to do a triple act here for everybody. I'm going to start off, and then I'm going to hand over to Rachel and Alan. So hopefully you will be able to see my screen. I'm just putting it on too.
Yes, we can, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. So, yeah, this is a joint presentation about the integrated sexual health services in Reading, and as I said, it's a joint presentation with myself, consultant in public health at Reading Borough Council. I do work for Reading Borough Council happily, and we've got Rachel Smart with us, lead nurse at the Florey Clinic for Royal Berks Hospital Foundation Trust, and Dr. Alan Tang, the consultant in sexual health and HIV at the Florey Clinic as well. And the background and purpose of the report and this set of slides. The United Kingdom Health Security Agency, UKSHA, published a spotlight report in June 2023 on sexually transmitted infections, STIs, in the South East region. And that used 2021 data. And the report noted that while overall infection rates are lower in the South East than the national average, some localities, including Reading, were reporting infection rates above the national average, and that did cause some concern, and there was some coverage in the press, I understand. These slides and the accompanying report for the committee aim to provide a brief analysis of trends in local STI diagnoses, an overview of the commissioning arrangements for the Integrated Sexual Health Service in Reading, an outline of the performance management processes, and it refers to the activity about safe sexual health, promotion and education that's in place to monitor and manage service delivery and prevent local STIs. We're in the business of prevention here in the council, as we've just heard, in relation to oral health. The next slide sets out the commissioning arrangements in England, and it might not be, it may not be readily apparent to everybody that the LA, the local authority, is not the only commissioner in the field. And we've got the STI testing and treatment, chlamydia screening and HIV testing there on the left in bold. That's what we're going to be talking about. But the local authorities also commission comprehensive sexual health services, including most contraceptive services and all prescribing costs, but excluding general practice, and specialist services, which include young people's sexual health, teenage pregnancy services, outreach, HIV prevention, sexual health promotion, services in schools and college and pharmacies. The ICB, they commission most abortion services, sterilisation, vasectomy, non-sexual health elements of the psychosexual health services, gynecology, including any use of contraception for non-contraceptive purposes. And NHSE, they commission contraception provided as an additional service under the GP contract, HIV treatment and care, promotion of opportunistic testing and treatment for STIs and patient-requested testing by GPs, sexual health elements of prison health services, sexual assault referral centres, cervical screening, and specialist fetal medicine services. So there are three main players that we need to be aware of. And it covers a number of areas, but as I said, we're focusing on STI testing and treatment. So the local integrated sexual health service, it's provided by Royal Berkshire Hospital Foundation Trust, and we've got our colleagues with us to talk a bit about that. It's jointly funded by the three local authorities of Berkshire West, that's Wokingham, West Berkshire and Reading acts as the lead commissioner. The contract was awarded to the Royal Berks following a competitive tender in 2020, and it could run for a maximum of 10 years. The contract value is 2.56 million per annum, and the contribution from Reading's ring-fenced public health grant is 1.4 million. The service provides timely screening and STI testing, rapid access for vulnerable groups and those at increased risk presenting with urgent priority conditions. It routinely offers HIV and syphilis testing for viral hepatitis B and C for high-risk groups, immediate treatment of uncomplicated infections in index patients and their contactable contacts, rapid and confidential contact tracing and partner notification where an infection has been diagnosed or confirmed, and support for service users with a diagnosed infection to understand its importance, and promotion and delivery of vaccination, which includes hepatitis A and B and HPV. I'm going to now talk through three sets of charts which are in the report. Let's paint a picture for us about the STI testing rate in Reading. And Reading is the red line there, which was well above England and the southeast region leading up to the start of the pandemic as we went into 2019 and 2020. And this is about people accessing sexual health services resident in Reading and plotted against averages for England and southeast. They're the usual comparators. The pre-pandemic testing rate for STIs in Reading was significantly above the regional and national averages and was increasing year on year. However, following the pandemic, the testing rates in Reading have not rebounded, as it were, to the same degree as the England rate. And the STI rate in Reading in 2022, which is where this data is based on, is about 75% of the level seen in 2019. And that compares with a return to 97% of the 2019 level in England. This slide is about chlamydia. And historically, the diagnosis rate, as I said, was significantly higher than England and Southeast. And the pattern here is similar to what we've just seen, that there's a drop dramatically with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, as you can see here, the red line crosses the green, well, certainly the black dotted line and starts to converge with the green dashed line there at the bottom, which is the southeast region. So Reading has decreased, it's continued during 2021 and 2022, and that's different to what's been seen in England. And is the first year in an 11-year period when STI diagnosis rates in Reading are below England averages. And this pattern in overall diagnosis is similar to the diagnosis rates for chlamydia and gonorrhea in Reading, an initial drop in diagnosis rates in 2020, which has continued, as I say, into 21 and 22. A little note there at the bottom that the numbers of syphilis diagnoses are too small to say if any decrease is statistically significant. However, in Reading, the rates did fall between 2020 and 2022, again, in contrast to the increase which has been seen across England. This slide is providing a similar picture, and this is excluding chlamydia. It shows positive tests as a percentage of those people receiving a test. This shows that the decrease in diagnosis rate in Reading has been accompanied by a decrease in percent positivity. Tests taken in 2022 are less likely to return a positive result than those taken in 2019. This is opposite to the pattern seen in the region and in the country. And it could support the conclusion that the decreasing STI rates seen in Reading are not due to a slower rate of return to pre-pandemic total testing rates. And it could indicate that testing is not targeted as effectively in Reading as it is elsewhere. It could also indicate a lower rate of underlying community transmission, beg your pardon. I'm now going to hand over to Rachel, I think.
Yes, thank you very much, Martin. Can you all hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can.
I can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you. So I just, Martin talked briefly about the Florida Clinic, but I just wanted to have a little talk about what we do. So we do see over 2,000 patients a month for sexual health and just under 500 a month for contraception. And we also see people living with HIV for ongoing care and people with psychosexual needs. As you can see in this graph, our attendance levels have stayed within a similar range. However, there has been a significant increase in more complex patients over this time. So throughout the pandemic, obviously, there was a lot of change to our working through online testing and people being able to routinely test online and not have to come into the clinic. That has meant with that rebound, we have seen more complex people with more social complexity needs or sexual healthcare needs as well. If you could go to the next slide, please, Martin. So with our current performance monitoring, so we meet regularly with our Reading Commissioning team as well as West Berkshire and Wokingham to look at our current key performance indicators. In conjunction, we have reviewed our KPIs this year to make sure they're really important to the service as well as to the commissioners. One of the KPIs I just wanted to pick out of the service was service users aged 15 to 24 who have been tested for chlamydia. We know this is a higher risk group for chlamydia. Another reason I just wanted to pick it out is that in some of the previous slides that Matt has discussed, chlamydia was excluded within that. But since COVID, we have seen a big change in education and awareness for younger people and their sexual health and the need for testing. So we are working really hard to ensure that there is a place for young people to come come and that they're able to access our service. Some of the things we've done with that, so we've improved our outreach service and we continue to look at improving our social media campaigns. We've been attending university and college visits, as well as making sure the service is appropriately and under 18s can access that service as well. So leading on from those points, just if we go to the next slide, please. I just wanted to talk about the things that we are doing to improve the service and ensure that we're doing everything we possibly can. So through the use of service user feedback, we've adapted our opening hours this year to ensure a more equitable access for service users. So we've ensured we've got late and early start time, so people are able to attend outside of work and outside of school hours as well. We've adopted the use of walk-in and appointments to ensure that people have choice of how they want to attend, and we've improved our online services to ensure people are able to test and access that appropriately, as well as continuing to develop online services so that people don't have to attend the clinic if they don't need to. We have also seen a change in demographics of people who want or need to attend our service since the pandemic. So in Reading and in Berkshire, we have seen more refugee and asylum seekers that are housed in Reading, either temporarily or permanently. And as a service, we have gained additional funding outside of our local authority contract to provide additional testing to those populations and to target people who might be at higher risk. With this additional funding, we're planning to provide an outreach service and support for testing, as well as having the money for translators and able to offer the time required for these patients, be it for contraception or for STI testing. And we're hoping to start this project later this year and work with organisations hopefully for access and improving the service. As I discussed earlier, we have also noticed an increase in young people not being aware of preventative measures or of STI testing, and in particular young men who have sex with men and HIV support or preventative measures. So we have received additional funding as well for young people who are members of the LGBTQIA+ community to ensure that we can appropriately test and promote that service. Reading is an area of high prevalence for HIV, so it is essential for the service that we're able to put in that extra time and resource for testing and preventative measures, as well as helping to reach the government's aim to zero transmissions by 2030. As a service, we are aware that our GumCAD submissions, so some of the data that you've seen in the slides that goes to Public Health England, isn't as accurate and has errors within it. And we have been working with the commissioning team to ensure that we're reviewing this data set, and we have created our own data sets with the commissioners that we're working on, as well as our KPIs to ensure that our data is as accurate as it possibly can be. Just a couple of other points that I wanted to raise about the service that we've been working on, which is really important to Reading and the community within it. However, it isn't quantifiable by our STI testing rates and takes obviously time out of our clinic to do so. So I think obviously our promotion that we've been doing for other services and populations that we know are high risk for STIs, so going into universities and colleges and working with Pride and ensuring charities are aware of us, improvements within our outreach work and targeting specific groups within Berkshire. So we've worked specifically on new projects like the Seeking Sanctuary projects, where we've been able to provide education sessions and STI testing as well. Another big point that we have been doing a lot of work on, especially since the end of the pandemic, is working with social care and the police around clinicians and staff members attending the child exploitation meetings. It is really important within sexual health, as we have extra confidentiality surrounding our sexual health services, which has caused previous concerns to local authorities when sexual health hold information about young people that may be relevant or prevents to safeguard children from exploitation. It is really vital that we spend that extra time and have links to share appropriately with the police and social care and ensure the risk of child exploitation in Reading is minimalised. And ensure social care and police are able to refer into our service. As sexual health is open access, we can see a vast number of people who come through the door, including mental health and domestic violence concerns. We are one of the only health services that has where we see people by themselves and we actively ask about domestic violence, meaning we do uncover and we are route for disclosure for people as well, which obviously isn't related to our STI testing, but is a really important aspect for the community. Over the last year, the Florey Clinic has also led on the Mpox Global Health Emergency in Reading and provided vaccination services to eligible members within the community, working closely with the Royal Berkshire Hospital and other members of sexual health services within Bob around that. And we continue to support the Royal Berkshire Hospital with opportunistic testing for sexually transmitted infections and education, and helping support with young people who may attend the service or in the Royal Berkshire Hospital as well. So I'll pass back to Martin just for the closing side, but Alan and I will be happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thanks, Rachel. I've got 2 slides just to bring this together to a conclusion. We've got conclusions from the GumCAD STI data. The STI testing rates and diagnoses dropped sharply between 2019 and 2020, reflecting the reduction in service access that resulted from COVID-19 containment measures. STI testing rates in Reading have rebounded since the lifting of those containment measures, and in 2022 they were at 75% of the level seen in 2019, which is in contrast to the return to 2019 levels as seen on averages across England. A lower return to pre-pandemic testing rates in Reading has been accompanied by a decrease in STI diagnosis rates beyond the initial sharp drop from 2019 to 2020 and continuing steadily in 2021 and 2022. This again differs from the national picture, which shows an increase in STI diagnosis rates between 2021 and 2022. The cases of gonorrhea and syphilis at a national level have risen above pre-pandemic levels. This differs with Reading, where rates of these diagnoses have steadily declined between 2020 and 2022, with cases of gonorrhea showing a statistically significantly decreasing trend. Decreases in diagnosis could be due to a decrease in effective testing and identification or a lower rate of community transmission. Percent positivity data would seem to eliminate the possibility that the decrease in diagnosis in Reading is due to a slower return to a pre-pandemic total testing rate. Alongside the possibility of a low rate of community transmission, it remains a possibility that decreasing diagnosis rates are due to less effective targeting of testing. So the general conclusions are in the report and the slides, are that Reading is seeing an increase in overall positive STI diagnosis. The extent of the increase is currently less severe than seen nationally, and Reading is seeing a year-on-year reduction in new diagnoses for specific infections of chlamydia, gonorrhea and syphilis. The smaller increase in positive STI rates should not be downplayed, and contract monitoring and review will be maintained to keep watch on any continued rise in overall STI rates. There are well-established monitoring processes in place that allow both the service provider and public health commissioners to regularly keep track of local data. These processes have been further strengthened by joint work between the commissioners and the service provider towards a more robust activity data dashboard. The work of the Integrated Sexual Health Service will continue to be supported through the wider safe sex educational campaigns and activity commissioned by the local public health teams. Work continues with the service provider to assess and ensure the longer-term sustainability of the service in the face of increasing activity and cost pressures. For example, the Agenda for Change uplift in pay. And that's the end of the show.
Thank you very much, Martin. Was Dr. Tang going to say something, or it was only Rachel?
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to answer any questions, that's all.
Okay, all right, thank you. There is the report about the sexual health, and I think one of our councillor who read some news article brought that to us also to discuss this and also bring it to the LCB of the late Councillor McQueen. Did you want to have something to say, Councillor McQueen?
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have a question actually, but as Chair mentioned, it was at one of my lead member briefings. One of our colleagues discussed raised this, and we had a really interesting presentation from yourself, Martin, and I think this is really useful for colleagues. So I thank the three of you for the update, because I don't know if this sexual health service has come to us before. Possibly it has, but I don't know. But I think it'd be useful for you've highlighted some really interesting issues. I mean, talking about the increase in the STI rates, and so maybe it's something that we could come back to present again and give some feedback on rates. I don't work through the chair, whether it's next year or something, but really to talk about the positive, the outreach work and the work with young people and around mental health and domestic violence. It's actually really interesting to hear about how all of that interconnects as part of the service. So I found it really interesting. So I'd really like to thank you for the report and for the update.
Thank you, Councillor McQueen. Councillor Cresswell has got a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. It was very interesting, very clear. On the decrease, the recent decrease in infection rates that you can explain either by a decrease in population propensity or differences in testing, have there been any differences in testing practice that would explain it? The kind of departure from tracking with the national average to behaving differently?
Chairman, may I answer the question?
Yes, Dr. Tang.
Thank you. So I think it's hard to compare like with like, because before the pandemic, we were walk-in service open 7 to 7 every day, including Saturdays. So therefore, we were a service of quantity, whereas during the pandemic, we learned to be a service of quality. So we focus on more specific populations and targeting our testing. It may have been successful. We're seeing the results of that if the data are accurate. It may actually be a success because rates are going down, then our efforts are successful. The population dynamics that you refer to are difficult because I think during pandemic, people were very much alone, and now people have rebounded. But also people don't have any more geographical boundaries that they had previously and travel much further with dating apps and so on. People working from home, whereas previously we were traveling. The dynamics are very interesting and worthy of study. At the moment, I think we are doing the best we can to give a quality service. As Rachel says, the complex cases are increasing because we get referrals from GPs, from accident emergency, from hospital services for advice on problems they have no knowledge of. So we provide a lot of high-level expertise for that. I think that does drain some of our clinical time, while the parallel testing services are going on that we're rolling out. So I hope that answers some of the queries you may have, but it is a work in progress. I think it's not clear at the moment.
Thank you, Dr. Tang. I think Councillor McCogney has got a question.
Thank you, and thank you for that report. It was just two very quick questions. You mentioned in your report about, it could potentially be less effective targeting that is seeing the sort of dip in positive tests or cases. I'm just wondering what steps you're thinking about taking to address that, because obviously if that is the case, that is quite worrying. And the other thing sort of to mention is you talked about the LGBT community and working with Pride, which as you will know is not just one excellent event, but a core part of our community throughout the year. And I wondered you're a very visible service within the LGBT community in Reading, which is fantastic and to be commended. I wondered what steps you're taking in terms of, it's very worrying that we're a HIV hotspot, that is quite concerning, but what steps are you going to take in terms of making sure that HIV prevention and awareness doesn't lead to stigma and doesn't lead to some unhelpful, some would say old-fashioned prejudices around HIV and AIDS. So I'm just wondering what steps you're going to take the LGBT community with you in that in particular.
Dr. Tang or Rachel, who is answering?
I'm happy, Rachel. Yeah.
Okay, so I think so obviously we've put in some money for some grants for some applications for additional funding for that. So we have received 2 additional grants to try and support additional testing. So within our refugee and asylum seeker population, so we can go out and do some education and testing surrounding that, which obviously takes up a little bit more of our time, and additional funding for young people and then within the LGBTQ community. I think one of the big things that we're really trying to do is work with young people on it. So we're looking at how we can get a group of young people together and how we can best use that money and promote it within the community. I think our main point within that is about testing rather than anything else. Obviously, we want to ensure that we are engaging young people in testing and members from the LGBTQI+ community, and I think we will work with those members of the community to ensure that we aren't increasing any stigma and ensuring we're doing it in a really positive way about looking after your sexual health and how good that is for the community and for individuals as well.
Thank you very much. Did you want to add anything, Dr. Tang?
May I say something on targeting, Chairman, that was referred to? It is an interesting aspect because with targeting, if we increase the access to the service by providing more online services, and so that patients can book themselves directly, then it does open up the door to people who work well to repeat test. So that's going to dilute the numbers. But it's difficult. We've got to provide easy access to as many people as possible with sexual risk and who have conditions to treat. But in doing that, there will be an element of people using the service to alleviate anxiety, perhaps. And I think the trick is how to improve our tool that will to help people select what service they need, whether they need some testing service or be seen. The testing is very difficult because it's hard to refuse a test when someone requests it. We have to give it out. So targeting is a work in progress, like a lot of what we do, and the result of whether successful or not, it depends on the data. I've been a physician here for 3 decades, so 30 years. This is the first time we've seen STI rates fall. Is that success at the end of my career, or is it failure? I don't know. It's very interesting, this targeting and access question.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask something about, I work a lot with refugees and asylum seekers all over the country. One of the things, no recourse to public funds, which comes across, and we have a lot of refugees and asylum seekers in Reading, and the fact that some of them are fearful to sort of come and have those tests because they're afraid to go to authorities. They think probably that's the time I'll be deported. How do you navigate working with asylum seekers, specifically the ones in hotels or the ones that probably are here temporarily and then all of a sudden you don't hear anything from them because they've been moved by the Home Office?
It's okay if I answer that one. So we have been working incredibly hard with our outreach team and with midwives and other services within Royal Berkshire to ensure that we're really trying to build up relationships within these communities. I think obviously it is really difficult for people who are scared or concerned that their results might have an impact on that. But I think with additional time and resources, we're able to build up relationships and build up trust within these communities that actually, as sexual health, we don't share any of that information. And I think that's really important. So there's additional funding needs for translation services and the ability to still go in to different places every week. It's really important to kind of build up those long-lasting relationships. And I think it's also really important to understand that not everyone has those same needs where we, for example, I know we're not talking about it specifically now, but for pregnancy, for if people don't want to continue having a family, actually talking about natural family planning methods and other ways that people can do that is really important. And I think showing as our outreach service that we're willing and open to work with communities in the way that they find helpful has been really important to us.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Gavin.
Thank you, Chair. It was an appeal more than anything else. thank you for your detailed presentation. I wonder whether we didn't see that in advance of the meeting, and I find it very useful as a member of the committee to be able to have time to read through information that's going to be presented to us, so I can have a think about it. I can think of the questions that I might want to ask. I personally, perhaps it's my age, but I've forgotten what's on slide 2 now already, and I haven't got anything to refer back to. So if please you could circulate that presentation to us all, we would then have that information, and in future could we ask that we have that information prior to a meeting, and I think it will probably sharpen up you know, the meeting and our ability to ask more pertinent questions, because we'll have had time to consider the report. Thank you.
I think that's a good point on that one, which Martin can take forward on that. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Davis?
Just a very quick remark. It's kind of refreshing to see that, to experience people who see ostensibly good results in their data and then questioning whether that's a success or whether that's a failure of how they've collected the data. And that was refreshing to see that from Dr. Tang. And I know I know which way politicians would choose to interpret that if they were placed in the same position. And that's my own comment on that.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Tang and Rachel and Martin, and have a good evening. So I think what we need to note is that we need to, I think what Councillor McQueen has said about, it seems refreshing to have these kind of conversations here. Maybe it is the first or after a long time, and that we can see in our council year that we put something again in probably next year to come back, even if Dr. Tang and Rachel and Martin look for other organizations that work probably with young people on these issues to bring them into the S committee to talk further about this. It will help very much. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, so we move to agenda item number 9, which is the Reading Youth Justice Plan 2023 to 2024. I think it's Anna Dutt who is giving the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Okay, so this is the Reading Youth Justice Service Plan. So the production of the annual plan is a condition both of the Youth Justice Grant and also as part of the duty under the Crime and Disorder Act 1998. The plan is produced and signed off by the, is overseen and signed off by the Youth Justice Partnership, and that's through the mechanism of the Youth Justice Management Board, which is independently chaired. So the plan reports on the performance of the Youth Justice Service, previously known as the Youth Offending Service, for 22-23, and that's against national and local performance. It also highlights achievements outside of those national performance indicators, things like our work with parents and our work with children within the service. The plan outlines the Reading Youth Justice Service implementation of the Child First approach, and that can be understood as the national practice framework for those working with young people in the criminal justice service. The Youth Justice Board requested a peer review, which took place in November 22, and the recommendations from that peer review are also incorporated into the plan. The plan provides information on the youth justice cohort for 22-23, which includes things like children's adverse childhood experiences, groups of children which are overrepresented in the Youth Justice Service, and also things around the offence types as well within that cohort. So the annual report identified the following areas as priorities for 23-24. So we've included reducing first-time entrants into the criminal justice system. And whilst there has been a downward trend, we know that it forms one of the national indicators and it's still higher than we would like. So that remains an area of focus from 22-23 and into this year. We've also included a priority around addressing disproportionality within the criminal justice system, and that's within the partnership system. The Youth Justice Management Board have initiated a specific action plan as well around disproportionality. We've also included a priority around the impact of serious violence. So the service contributes to the Berkshire West Safeguarding Children's Partnership thematic child safeguarding review that took place last year, and we report through to the Adolescent Risk Strategic Group of the One Reading Partnership, both in terms of our working relationships with particular partners like Children's Social Care. The final priority is around the increase in the participation and engagement of children, young people and their families within the service. And one of the areas that we've been focusing on most recently is developing a community peer court to enable children to become part of the solution, underpinning our restorative justice principles which are outlined in the plan, as well as taking us back to that child first approach. So the Youth Justice Management Board have oversight of the plan and performance against the targets, and that's reported on through those mechanisms through the Management Board structure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hoskin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing the report. One of the things that people will note is that it has already gone via, we're kind of noting because it's gone via the board and been signed off. So and I think the good thing, this has come to us. I think it's the first time it's actually come via a committee, and I think that's positive. But what we'll do is look to sort out the timing so that we get to look at it at the right point before getting the sign off. I think that's important. That said, I think we can be assured by the report and the plan here. I think there's some really good stuff, and it's good to see that in general the service is performing well, particularly around reoffending rates. If you look at that relatively, but it's not a complacent report, and the independent peer review, is reassuring. I think that it's been done and incorporated in the plan. I think is good. Just a cursory look over this, you can see it is the first time entrance, the first offending element, which is the bit that really needs priority and clearly is being prioritised within this because we want to reduce, keep kids out of the justice system is obviously the prime aim. The reasons for this I think is quite complex, not necessarily gone over in the report. I think we need to consider whether there's some different activities of the police or act a bit differently in Reading than they might elsewhere, and whether that creates some of the statistics as well. So I think it needs delving into and working through, but certainly reducing that will be something I want to see before when we start to bring this bit back around next time. But in general, I think it's a good plan, some good work here, and some stuff that really really important work that this council is involved in. I also would say I think it's really interesting that I think the youth justice system the youth offending service is a good example of how a localized service really makes a difference. I mean, people have heard stuff about probation and sort of a national system really malfunctioning, but it's if you sort of see this, it's local partnerships, people working locally to to sort out the things that happen in Reading and making a difference. I think as councillors, I'm sure we will probably agree this is the way it should be done, and it's a good example. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hoskin. Councillor Cresswell.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for this. It's a really comprehensive report. Looks like a very good plan, and the data analysis in there is really useful. This might not be these might not be questions that you can answer here, but I just want to highlight two issues that we may want to look at. One is in the breakdown of stop and search on page 77, it appears that Reading black kids are twice as likely to be stopped and searched than white kids proportionally, despite there being no difference in the offending rates. So it'd be good to know why that is happening. It doesn't seem like a 2023 question, to be honest. I didn't think that would still be happening. And the other is on page 79, we have a table of offending rates for children who are permanently excluded or under alternative provision education or involved with social care. And this is the population of kids that I work with professionally, and it's a bit disappointing to see that compared to the national rates there, we're not doing well compared to the national rates. And it'd be interesting to know your thoughts about whether that's to do with how we're doing things or our population, or how that might be explained.
Thank you. So the stop and search data, and that focuses in the disproportionality plan, and that's been led by our police colleagues. That also includes the recent data around strip search as well, but absolutely the board have recognised that that's something that needs to be a focus within that disproportionality plan, and some lively debates actually about that at the last board meeting. Absolutely, in terms of the kind of risk and protective factors for our children within the YJS cohort, and we've done some deep dive work around clusters or around adverse childhood experiences and the impact of that, and we know that we need to do better really in terms of being in education particularly, and also our cohort of children with special educational needs. So absolutely we recognise that the risk factors there and the impact that has, but the things that we can do as a partnership to make that difference is within our gift, if you like. So absolutely, those have been two areas that, again, at the last board meeting where we did a deep dive into the cohort, came out particularly as an area of focus.
Thank you. Any other questions? I didn't see. I can't see. My vision is like when I'm wearing glasses, I can't see Councillor Gavin on this side and all that and everything. I'll start with you and then come to Councillor Ter. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you ever so much. It's just a quick sort of question comment, because I was also interested in the out of education aspect of it, having worked on Bracknell's youth offending team many years ago, many years ago. What I wanted to know was about the restorative, because at the birth of the youth justice teams, there was a really big push on restorative justice. And I didn't quite, it's more maybe for future reports, I didn't quite understand the data on page 33. So I didn't understand the difference between where consent was given, those who accept the service, the indirect restorative and the direct restorative, because I can remember the sort of quite strict structures around a restorative justice meeting, and I realised things have probably moved on since then. I guess I didn't know whether our data was looking good or not. So I wasn't able to make a judgment because it was just raw numbers without much explanation. So I suppose what I'm asking is, how are we doing with restorative justice? Because I know that it can be massively impactful for both the offender and the victim, and it goes a long way to sort of healing community feelings and fear of crime. So how are we doing on it? Are we doing okay? And perhaps next time, would we be able to see some comparison to see whether we've done better than the year before? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. Because as you say, that raw data tells us that it's a snapshot in time, isn't it? So we have dedicated restorative justice roles, both in terms of reparation as well as restorative justice processes, as you'll be familiar with. In terms of comparisons with other youth justice services, I wouldn't be able to say now, but absolutely. But yeah, we do retain those dedicated posts. And and part of the community panel is led by the restorative justice practitioner. So in terms of, there's also some of the feedback from the peer review was enhancing the victim, more explicit around the victim support in our casework. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Tan.
Many thanks for this, Chair. My question is basically, we have seen our own as well, and I would say my colleagues from Borough. So, and also the local residents also complained, and mostly the youngsters, the young children are exchanging like drugs and so, but definitely we can't blame them because they are innocent. They are being used by the adult or the, the drug dealers or so. Is there any policy or anything regarding this as well to prevent that one? Because these children, when they are involved right now, and if they are successfully doing this exercise repeatedly, definitely they will be having more maturity in this one. In future, it is very alarming and very, it will be difficult to come back or bring them back. Thank you.
So the report talks about the turnaround programme, which is a national programme in terms of the preventative aspect of the Youth Justice Service, which we've established in Reading. And absolutely, I think a recognised direction of travel nationally with Youth Justice Services around prevention, back to the point around the reducing first-time entrants. With our police colleagues around the management board, that there's clearly a link there with the perception of crime. How groups of young people are perceived through to those where they're actually involved in, victims themselves of things like criminal exploitation, and those that are found guilty of, specific offences. So absolutely that focus on prevention, and the Youth Justice Service and this plan is a key is explicitly linked with the Community Safety Partnership and their priorities, so that we really do kind of have that line across community safety as well as kind of the drill down into our youth justice cohort. Does that answer your?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this report very much for me on page 52, where you say the principles of first approach at Reading YJC includes centering the child is the most important thing. Working in collaboration with other organizations makes a very, very important way of going forward, where we need to look at how we move on, especially as a parent. Also, you don't want the violence and all these other things. You don't want to be waiting at home and not seeing your child coming back, or something has happened that is violent, that could have been avoided at a young age, where they go into criminality and all that. And it's quite important that we try and bring it back again to this committee and try and work with all the other organizations and see and continue. But the report is actually a good report to continue on further. Thank you for that work. Thank you. Any last minute burnouts now on this one? No, thank you. So as a committee notes the content of the Youth Justice Plan, and we do agree it's a good report. Anyone objecting that's not a good report? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we move to exclusion update, a report. I think it's Brian and Fiona. We are going to, oh, sorry, you're there. Okay, is that Fiona? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm the author of this report, Fiona Hostler, Head of Education Access and Support to Brighter Futures for Children. I'm working on the basis that I assume that you've read this report in full in advance. This report was focused specifically on an overview of permanent exclusion, so you'll note that there'll be kind of suspensions data missing from this, and again a focus on how we seek to ensure we hear and respond to the voices of our children and young people in the borough. So it's not by any stretch of the means all of the work we're doing. This is a particular focus on how we ensure child voice through our work. And again, just to highlight, this is a report based on the last academic year in total, but I will go on to some steps that we're taking so far this term to give assurance to the group. We ensured that we had a bit of a sense check on the research project that we had that was led purely by young people. We had the voices of 3 young people in Reading that had been permanently excluded from school, and their experiences were really pivotal in supporting action plans and a response to our schools. This was disseminated to schools and other leaders, and that people that I'm working with now, despite the fact that that report is kind of coming up to kind of being in place for a year or so, people are still really interested in it and really want to hear from our children and young people, and it's still being disseminated now to new people in Reading in leadership. The Timpson review, we mentioned other kind of research-based approaches to ensure that our work is really being led by the research that's already been done into effective ways of supporting children and young people. We've included some examples of some casework that has been done over the last academic year. And there's also some data in there regarding where we sit in relation to different indicators, South East and national as well. So in terms of the permanent exclusion kind of overview, Reading schools were down by 1 last academic year, but we had an increase in the permanent exclusions issued for Reading children in out-borough schools, a bit like we were talking about earlier. So overall, we had an increase in 1 on the academic year. Previously. I also included the work that we'd done on kind of some work you might not see from the statistics. So 26% we managed to support to be rescinded and revoked for those children. There are also a level within there where those decisions were overturned by governing bodies or independent review panels which review the exclusion following a hearing process. And that included a range of children, including some of our most vulnerable groups, children with education, health and care plans, for example, that were really positive outcomes for those children and young people. We also included in here some disproportionality data on ethnicity. There is disproportionality in various aspects of our exclusions data, such as SEND that I've just referenced, but this was a focus on some figures on our children and young people where we really need some impact and some continued action by the team, and that was shared with our Education Partnership Board. There was also an overview of particular action plans that we have in place to ensure a focus across different strategies. In terms of our current work on disproportionality, especially, that is continuing. I mentioned about it being shared with our Education Partnership Board, which is really about increasing school-to-school support and being transparent with the data that we're holding. That's accountability for the whole of the Reading education system. These are all of our children, and how do we support one another to be reducing some of these figures. We've also mentioned from Anna, the Youth Justice. I'm a representative on the Youth Justice Board, and that link of exclusions and suspensions and how they can increase likelihood of entering the criminal justice system, for example, and how we support each other to ensure our strategies are closely linked and we're working towards the same goals. In part of some of these aims, you may see the same piece of the sort of strategy repeated, and that's purely because we're ensuring we've got the data that's driving the intervention. We may be crossing over. So, for example, one of the actions highlighted that may have come up repeatedly was around funding for our schools, and actually we've managed to work with the youth justice system to pool some of our funds together. We're both trying to reach the same aim, and actually we can be stronger together by being connected and having cross service strategies to improve the outcomes for our children and young people. Yeah, I think that's kind of a bit of an overview for you and a bit of content about our current work as well happening this term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor McQueen?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this report. I'm going to be really brief. I just want to say I really welcome the report. I think it is and it should be a real sort of key area of focus for us as local authorities, brighter futures, for us councillors. It's such an important area of discussion, and I think it's really important that we feedback on this as well. So, and I've said this a few times today, Chair, and I'm sorry, but I think it'd be quite interesting, the work that has been highlighted, that this comes back and we can review the progress and the work that's been carried out. But I'm just going to leave it at that because I'm assuming people have got questions for you. So thank you very much for the report. I think it's really informative. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Creswell.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. Do we have data on the level of education provided to excluded pupils whilst they've been excluded? Apologies if I've missed it in the report, but it would be good to see.
Yeah, we do hold that. Yeah, we have an understanding of all the educational provision of our pupils excluded. But happy to bring that back in a report if needed. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Gavin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I was a classroom teacher for more than 20 years, so I absolutely understand the pressures at times of the almost impossible task of managing disruptive pupil behaviour, particularly in large class sizes. So I absolutely get why some schools feel they cannot cope with the pressures of educating all the other children and all the other pressures the school have to address the needs of individual children. I get that pressure. But any child not in school is a small tragedy, or for that child and for their families. It further marginalises vulnerable children without actually solving the root causes of why a school felt that they could no longer cope with the child. So I welcome all the work that this report highlights in working with schools, young people and their families to address the issues that are causing multiple suspensions and permanent exclusions. Reading's team and schools are clearly having some success. Our suspensions are below national average, which is good. And it's good to see that the rate of permanent exclusions is falling, although there was an extra one last year, which kind of, but they're small numbers, aren't they? So we need to be careful about, worrying about one up, one down. However, I think as the service rightly identifies, much more work needs to be done to address the disproportionality apparent in these figures. And the action plan that is in here, or the actions listed, look robust, but the proof is always in the pudding. And so I would absolutely endorse Councillor McEwen's request for this to come back to us to see whether we've addressed any of those disproportionality issues in particular, although obviously we want to see all exclusions, permanent and suspensions, actually down, because we don't want any child to miss their education. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you. Yes, I'm reading through it. So page 115, you mentioned that 12 permanent exclusions were rescinded or overturned. Do we have any data on how many of these went on to be permanently excluded again? Or whether or not it was successful, which is hopefully, is what happened. I love data. I like sort of trying to work out what's happening. That led me to sort of think about whether or not we had data on children whose parents are encouraged to make managed moves to other schools. Now, these can be extremely successful if they're done well, between two schools. It can be a fresh start for the pupil and, a really good new beginning. But I think the cynics in most of us would also recognise it can occasionally be an opportunity to pass the problem, as that child may well be labelled. on somewhere else without having a permanent exclusion on the school's records. Do we have any data on managed moves between schools? And if so, do we have any data on whether or not those managed moves were successful, or whether they went on to be permanently excluded from their new school? Because we also know, you better than anyone, no doubt, that the more school moves a child has, the less likely they are to attach to the new school, and the shorter amount of time it takes for them to sort of fall out of that school. So yeah, I love data.
That's fine. I think we've got quite a lot in the service. You asked the question kind of initially about each of these children that were issued the permanent exclusion and what happened since then. 0 have been going forward. And I think one of the councillors to my left made a point about ensuring that the children have the right support where they are, and that's really what that conversation is about. What do you need and what support can we provide you to ensure they stay with you, which has been effective in those cases, albeit slightly later than we maybe would have preferred in some, but better nonetheless for those young people. We do have data on managed move. We have data, we collect how many managed moves. It's reported by the schools. It's reported via our fair access protocol, which the managed moves come under, but it's in their best interests to give us those figures, because it's done on fairness and distribution of children under that protocol. So we're confident it's accurate. And in terms of children moving on to go through into permanent exclusion, I'd have to get that for you, but we do have that data. Yeah.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask hopefully a really quick question, just for, sort of related to what Councillor Gavin asked about focusing on disproportionality. On page 116, I'm trying to interpret that the bottom 2 rows of that table. It says, like the penultimate row says percentage of ethnic group. And it doesn't add up to 100. I don't quite know what correct. That means.
Yeah, I remember speaking to my data officer about that particular one as well. So the bottom line is the percentage of the overall school population of that ethnicity, and within that group. So so the line above it represents that there was 30 times that amount of population within the excluded group of children, or which page is that? Sorry, a suspended group of those children. So it's represented 30% of the cohort within that group. Hopefully I've explained myself. Now I'm doubting my own self.
Does that make it a factor rather than a percentage?
Yes, potentially. I'll ensure that I'll get clarity on exactly what that means. Yeah, have the highlighted area as the kind of the feature of the data, but I will absolutely get you the line of how that can be explained, because I've not done it particularly well. My apologies.
That would be really helpful, because I think it's quite important.
Yeah.
And I think my brain's too small to interpret it.
Thank you. I think for me, the interest mainly will be to look at the, I'm interested in saying and looking at, we have 54% BME children in Reading, which is the Justice One report that does that. I was interested in finding out the link between things that happen in social justice, SAND, and exclusion, whether we could look at what might be happening in those and how does it link to all this, because it's quite important that we might have the exclusion and then at the same time have that young person, child, or going also in youth justice systems where we are not sure what might be happening, or the link of also looking at SAND and finding out, because we know there's a backlog of assessment of children on SAND that's particularly not for the problem of Reading Borough Council, but because there's lesser people in NHS to do that. And do you think that we can come back, as it is important, some of the councillors have, to look at the links so that we don't miss out as as also as councillors and officers, the most important crucial things to identify these things before they get more serious than we think, or checking with the people that do the youth justice to find out, was this child also involved in either something that happened when they were in school, or was there something missed on their assessment about sand? Because as we know now, we have a good strategy that is from 0 to older age about sand assessment, and many people have not been assessed, including people who are over 50 or 40. It's quite important to link those things and see how we go about when we come back again. Is that it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think the report just wanted an update on this. We don't need to agree to update and the action plan that they are doing to reduce exclusion and suspension. So we didn't need to vote on that. Thank you. So we go to our last two items. As chair, I'll read the following motion. Which is item 11, and then we go to 12 and 13. It says the pursuant of section 100, it's an exclusion of the press and the public. The pursuant of section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, members of the press and public be excluded during consideration of the following item on the agenda, as it is likely that there will be disclosure of exempt information as defined in the relevant paragraph of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of that Act. So we'll give it a minute where we are members of the public and online also. This is a closed session. Thank you.